Blessings of His Holiness, we've gathered here for the webinar on applications of discrete mathematical structures. Today we have with us Mr. Rama Badrinath. Let me just read out a brief profile of him. Rama Badrinath has completed his engineering from RV College of Engineering, and then he went on to do his master's from IISc Bangalore. He has more than 7 years of industrial experience in the field of ML and has worked for Microsoft, Hike, and ShareChat. Currently, he works as a freelancer, a data scientist, primarily focusing on ML and NLP, natural language processing. I welcome Mr. Rama Badrinath, for this webinar, and I request you to start the session.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the introduction, everyone. So it's good to be here, and thanks a lot for joining. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah,
so applications of discrete maths is again, right?
Yeah, we can see.
Cool. So today I'll be talking about some of the applications of discrete maths. So I'm not going to bore you guys with the part. So if you have any questions in between, feel free to stop me in between. Cool. So before starting, let's ask this basic question, like why should we study discrete maths, right? I mean, for that matter, any subject, right? So of course you are studying this for, marks, exams, degree, and etc. But I feel that there is a beautiful connection between DMS and some of the real world problems, right? So, so today my main aim is to cover these important connections. And don't worry, I'll not be covering some hi-fi stuff, but I'll be covering some simple examples that you all understand and relate to, right? Cool. So before we begin, a quick introduction about myself. So I've been working as a freelance data scientist in the field of learning and natural language processing. And these are the problems I'm currently working on. So let's say given an image, we have to detect the characters that are written on the image. So let's say in this particular example, we have to detect 4, CH, etc. Right? Okay, where is this used? So there is a traffic camera capturing the vehicle number plates of breaking the rules. And if I capture this image and if I have to figure out who that person is, then we'll have to detect these characters and convert that to text, right? So this is called optical character recognition. And I'm also working on face recognition and object identification. So in face recognition, so the problem is given an image, figure out all the persons or celebrities in that image. And in case of object identification, so the task is to figure out all the objects in a given image so that it can be used as a metadata, right? So why is this a good problem? Because most of the times images will not have metadata, right? So image itself is a data, and we have to sort of figure out the hidden content or the context with respect to that image, right? So if I use some sort of image or video related techniques in order to extract this information, then it can be used for personalization, recommendation, and so on, right? So that's why it's very, very important. Coming to the libraries that I normally use, so we normally use PyTorch, TensorFlow, and Keras. And because of deep learning revolution, in fact, everyone is sort of using the same libraries. Cool. So let's start with the application DMS. So I'll be covering around 3 to 4 topics today, mainly ranging from passwords and how to build a simple search engine, solving Sudoku puzzles, and important applications. Cool. Let's get started. So with passwords and the DMS connection that we have is counting techniques. Let's see how that relation exists, right? So let me start this topic by saying that your password is not secure, right? So let's see why. So let's look at a simple sign up flow where you want to create an account in Gmail. So normally you will see this screen where it asks you to enter your name, your username, password, and etc. Right? So let's assume that the name is Mahesh Kumar, and normally the username that we normally give is, let's say, Mahesh 90, where 1995 is the birth year, right? And when it comes to password, we tend to give some simple passwords, right? For example, let's say Mahesh without anything, or let's say MK Mahesh Kumar at 12345. And Mahesh, let's say 13/05/1995, which is the date of birth. So there's nothing wrong with that. These are valid passwords. But the whole intention or the idea behind having passwords is that others should not be able to guess, right? But we tend to give these weak passwords, right? Because we ourselves have to remember this in the first place, right? So that's why we tend to give these simple passwords, right? But we are not alone. So so most of the popular passwords look something like this, right? So people tend to give 12345 6 or password or QWERTY, admin, password, etc. Right? So what is the downside of this? So it can be easily cracked, right? So around 70% of the world's most popular passwords can be cracked in less than a second. So if you Google for this, so you will find many libraries such as Hashcat, which has various techniques in order to crack a password, right? Two most widely used and simple techniques are dictionary attack and brute force attack, right? So let me explain this in simpler. So in DAC, what you do is, you know that people tend to give some simple words in English, right? So you try to use these words again and try to check if the hash of this word matches hash of the leaked password, right? It's very simple. And people can also try out brute force attack, right? So as the name says, in brute force attack, you try to sort of list all the passwords. Let's say I tell you that a password has only 3 characters and I use only ABC, then it's easy to guess all the passwords, right? So they basically try out all the passwords, right? So let's ask this question. So how to make our passwords complex so that others can't crack it, right? So there is a simple formula that we use in order to figure out all the possible number of combinations of a password, right? So let's, you will have to basically, if you do brute force attack, then it's very to sort of list down all the passwords, right? So to do this, so the total possible number of combinations is equal to possible number of characters per password length, right? So let's say I use all the numbers, that is 0 to 9, and all the letters. Here I differentiate between uppercase letters and lowercase letters. Then totally I'll get around 62 characters, right? Then the total possible combinations is equal to 62 power the password length, right? So let's look at a simple example. What's actually happening behind this? So in DMS, you will study this simple concepts called sampling. Two techniques here, sampling with replacement and sampling without replacement. So in case of this, we are just using sampling with replacement, right? So let's consider a simple 4-length password. So if I have to generate a 4-length password, then if I have to choose the first character, I have 62 ways of doing it, right? Because I can pick any of the 62 characters, right? So if I chose 6, then the generated password like this, right? And 3 positions are vacant because I've not chosen that. And the second position, again, I've got 62 options. So the total possible combinations is equal to 62 power 2, right? I'm just multiplying all the combinations here. And the generated password looks like this, and so on. So if I have length equal to n, then this goes on continuing in this fashion. And the final number, it will be 62 power n, right? So some simple math, which is basically coming from sampling with replacement, right? And sometimes in many of the websites, it forces you to use at least one uppercase letter or one symbol, right? So in that case, obviously, some of the passwords using this violates the rules, right? In that case, we'll have to subtract some of the passwords which violate, and that can be easily derived using inclusion-exclusion principle, right? So you'll study this in DMS. So basically, DMS counting principles help you to understand what password is a simple password and what password is a complex password, right? And obviously, if I can generate the password using this technique, I can even write a program for this, right? And this same technique of generating the passwords can be used to crack the password, right? So here is a simple recursion that is written in Python, which can generate all the possible passwords using brute force technique, and finally checks if the hash matches the leaked passwords hash, right? So what's worse is that these days people are using machine learning for many things, and one of the things is to crack passwords, right? So people are using a technique called as GANs in order to generate the passwords. So here is a simple architecture for this. And if you look at this table, it has some of the passwords that are generated using machine learning. And you can see that most look exactly like human generated passwords, right? And we can go one step ahead and also guess the characters that are written on the captcha, right? So captchas are the puzzles that are that come in the second step, just to make sure that it's a human being which is doing the transaction, right? So you'll have to enter the characters that are written on this captcha, right? So we can use ML techniques in order to crack this, right? So no password is safe, right? So so what is the conclusion here? What is a good password, right? So the counting principle says that if you want to make your password complex, then you have two ones. Either you can use lengthy password, or you can add a lot of characters to your pool to make sure that this password possible number of characters per password length is as high as possible, right? And in this table, you can see that even on a CPU, if you have a 7 length password, then it can be cracked in less than a second. In fact, 0.3 milliseconds, right? And if you just increase the length of the by one position, then it takes 5 hours to crack it, right? So if you increase it by just one position, it becomes 62 times to crack, right? So the conclusion is pretty simple. Make sure that the length of the password is at least 10, use as many symbols as possible, and make it complex, random, and unique. So unique because you can't just use the same password for every website, right? Because if a hacker gets access to your password, then he gets access to every other website, right? So it's better to keep passwords unique. But the downside of this is that you can't remember the password yourself, right? So that's why we have password managers these days. So what they do is they will generate a good password for you for every website which is unique, and they also store it, and they will enter it on behalf of you whenever you need it, right? That's the conclusion here. Cool. Let's move to the next topic. So I want to move away slightly from the counting principles and talk about search engines, right? So the problem is simple: how to build a simple search engine, and what is the connection between graph theory and centrality and search engines, right? So graphs are very simple. They have nodes and edges, and if there is a relationship between two nodes, then there will be an edge between them, right? Cool. So the task is to build a simple search engine, and its job is to turn relevant results for a query, right? So in Google, there is a query box here, and here I have entered the query as coronavirus, and it has returned me some of the relevant results, right? So that's for me. Cool. So let's start with a simple solution where first step, if I have to build a search engine, then I'll have to create an index of all the websites, right? So what I do is I'll go and crawl all the websites. Let's assume that it is doable. I'll crawl all the websites, and I will parse the text, and I will construct some sort of an inverted index. Just a fancy term, but what it does is it indexes all in such a way that if there is a query, then it can return the results in milliseconds, right? Let's assume that there is an index which does this job, right? So if I have this sort of an index, then I can use text matching algorithm in order to check whether there is a similarity between query and the text that is there on the website, right? So if this is my simple algorithm, then obviously I can return, let's say, top 10 results for a given, right? Now let's analyze this for a minute. It turns out that it's a bad solution. Let's analyze this. So let's assume that there's a guy who wants to create fake news, right? They can obviously write a blog. Let's say in this case, Donald Trump is saying that the coronavirus is a hoax, right? So obviously someone can write this in text format, and if our crawler, if our crawler crawls this and indexes this in our database, and if there is a coronavirus query, then obviously I'm gonna return this in the top 10 results, right? Now this is a disaster because I'm returning fake news, and there is a possibility that user can churn, right? So here he'll not be satisfied with the result and he'll churn, right? So what are we missing here? So obviously we are missing the popularity of the website, right? So everyone trusts, let's say, University of Cambridge or WHO websites because they put genuine content, right? Obviously, if I'm just looking at the text matching, I'm not giving any importance to popularity. So that's why I'm facing this problem, right? So let's look at mitigating this problem by using graph theory, right? So let's look at this web for a minute and understand uh, uh, the hyperlinks, right? So I believe that you have all seen hyperlinks. So hyperlinks is nothing but a piece of text which has some underline below that, in this case, a link. So if you click on that link, it will take a new page, right? This is called a hyperlink, right? So if I can construct some sort of a graph out of this, then I can do something with this, right? So in this case, website 1 has some hyperlink to website 2, and website 2 has some hyperlink to website 3, and so on, right? So I have 5 websites, and using all the hyperlinks, I've created this graph, right? Cool. Let's look at a bigger example. So in this case, you see that I have constructed this hyperlink graph using all the links of the most popular sites, right? So we have Google.com, Invites, Amazon, YouTube, etc. So you can see that some of the sites have bigger circles and some of them have smaller circles, and that's because of the number of hyperlinks that they have, right? Number of incoming links, especially, right? So, a simple technique that I can use to figure out popularity is count the number of incoming links, right? So in this example, I can say that centrality or the popularity of website 1 is the sum of incoming links, right? Which is just 1 here. Sorry, here. And website 2 is equal to 1, and so on, right? So let's ask this question. Can we use sum of incoming links as the centrality popularity? Of course, I can use it, but here. So let's say that the graph is disconnected here, and it has a lot of right. Obviously, if it's one graph is not into out of the graph. So if it has some inequality, then the centrality doesn't make sense. So the key message here is that cannot look at the information of the graph in order to capture centrality, right? So immediately the next solution is we have to look at the global picture, right? So that's where PageRank comes in. So PageRank algorithm was in 1996. Cool. So in the PageRank algorithm, so the algorithm looks quite simple. So what it says is, instead of just looking at the local, can we look at the global information? So how do we do this? Let's use an iterative technique, right? So let's start by assigning PageRank score, which is just 1 to 6. And in order to calculate, I will the PageRank score. I'll just sum up the PageRank scores, right? So this technique actually gives awesome results, and this is the equation for this. So don't worry, this one can be. So they just added this to make sure that the whole algorithm converges. But the main part of the algorithm is that if you want to calculate the PageRank score for node, then it is just the PageRank score, sum of the PageRank score, right? And which is that if you want to get a high PageRank score, you just be friends with the numbers which are having high PageRank scores, right? So it's like saying that you are a rich person because you are friends with some people, right? So the same analogy works here also. And they incorporated this in the Google ranking algorithm. So what is the connection between DMS and PageRank algorithm here? So it turns out that PageRank score that is got by the bigger of transition matrix. Okay? So let's assume that I have got nodes, and if I have got some edges here, it can be represented in this form of a transition matrix, and the transition matrix will be a square matrix. Square matrix, its eigenvector corresponds to PageRank score, right? So the score gotten by this iterative technique will be exactly icon, right? So they incorporated this PageRank technique in the Google's ranking algorithm way back in 1996, and it instantly became a hit. And if you look at the results, you can in fact see that coronavirus has got the site at the top. So I'm not saying the page algorithm which is sort of working here, but is it's one of the important signals they random even get popular results at the top for a given query, right? Cool. So let's move towards graphing. So I believe that you have learned a bit about graph coloring. So let's look at solving Sudoku puzzles and its connection with graph coloring, right? Cool. So we have all seen Sudoku puzzles in apps in papers. So so the problem is very simple. So fill in the blank so that each column and two box has of 1 to 4 exacts, right? And just to make the problem simple, sometimes they'll get hints. So these hints you'll have to get the rest of the numbers, right? So generally we solve matrix, but let's look at first four matrix for a minute. We have all tried some heuristical methods in order to write, but let's look at this problem in graphs, right? So in order to solve this as a graph problem, my first step to convert this matrix to a right. So let's look at one of the simple ways of doing that, right? So let's start first cell, and since first row cell and finally opposite cell has some constant with the first node, obviously these are my nodes, right? So the neighbors of first node, the cells of first row, first column, diagonally opposite box, right? So if I construct a graph in this, then if I can construct or if I can come up with a graph coloring solution, then it turns out that this is the solution for Sudoku puzzle, right? So you can see that they have solved this graph problem, and if you map this back into a Sudoku puzzle, here you can see that one, it doesn't have any overlapping color with any of these and so on, right? So this is very interesting. I mean, if you have not tried this, just try this for a simple 4x4 or 2x2 matrix. You will realize that it really works, right? So okay, so what is the so why is it important, right? So if I can construct graph coloring, then obviously I can code for this, right? So here you can see a simple Python code for graph coloring. So actually graph coloring is a difficult problem. In fact, it is NP complete. In simpler terms, what it means that if the size of the graph increases, then time taken to solve the graph is almost exponentially. But obviously you can have a simple algorithm, a simple code for this, and this is the code. So even if someone gives you, let's say 9x9 or let's say 100x100 Sudoku, the solution remains the same, right? So just do graph coloring, right? Now we can go one step ahead, and we can in fact generate new Sudoku puzzles or solutions, right? So how do we do this? So let's start with a simple Sudoku solution and just read colors, right? So in this case, color 1 or number 1 is mapped to 2, 2 is mapped to 3, 3 is mapped to 4, and 4 is mapped to, and so on, right? So this is the original Sudoku solution, and after shuffling the colors, I've got this new solution. You can in fact verify that this is in fact a correct solution, and it satisfies all the Sudoku puzzle criteria, right? And just a second. And in fact, you can figure out total number of solutions for a 4x4 Sudoku puzzle, right? So in fact equivalent to 4 factorial into 2 into 2 into 3. It's a bit complicated to prove this, but using permutation combinations, you can actually prove that it is in fact equal to this number. Right? It's really interesting. So spend some time on this if you have time. Just Google this. Cool. So we have come to the last topic. Let's talk about a couple of other important applications of DMS. So quickly, I want to cover Fibonacci series and other things. So let's look at Fibonacci series. So if you have watched this movie Da Vinci Code, I think they talk about Fibonacci series there. What is Fibonacci series? So it's a simple series which is given by this recurrence relation. F of n is equal to f of n minus 1 plus f of n minus 2. So what it means is, if I start from two numbers, let's say 0, 1, then the next number equal to 1, and the next number is 1 plus 1 equal to 2, and the next number is 1 plus 2 equal to 3, 2 plus equal to 5, and so on, right? So why is this important? So if you divide nth Fibonacci number by its previous Fibonacci number, then it gives you a real value, which is 1.62, and this is called golden ratio, right? So why is this golden ratio important? It turns out that it's heavily used in architectures. So in Eiffel Tower, you can see that the ratio of this length to this length is in fact equal to golden ratio, right? And not only in these new structures, but even in old Roman time structures, they had the ratio built into their buildings, right? I mean, even I didn't know. And even in case of musical instruments, while making these musical instruments, they try to maintain this ratio, right? A1 is to A2 is golden ratio, B1 is to B2 is again a golden ratio, and so on, right? So the rationale behind this is that if you construct or if you make these musical instruments using this technique, then it produces good sound, right? So again, what is the connection between Fibonacci series and so if you construct a matrix, just a 2 cross 2 matrix, 0, 1, and 1, 1, and if you look at the eigenvalue of this matrix, it has two eigenvalues. One of them is positive and one of them is negative, and the positive value is equal to the golden ratio, right? So it's very, very beautiful connection. So you can in fact prove it, right? Cool. Let's look at QR codes. I'm sure you all have seen QR codes. We try to scan these QR codes of Paytm, PhonePe, Google Pay, etc. Right? I don't think we have seen the math or algorithm like this. So internally, what's happening is, so if you try to scan a QR code, it has these white and black boxes, right? So these white and black pixels in fact are mapped to some binary data, and when you scan it, it will be converted to these English characters, and that will be interpreted, right? And one of the crazy things about that it can still work if it's damaged, right? So try this simple experiment. So the next time you go to a store, first try to scan this normally, and the next time try to block a part of QR code, try to scan it, and you'll be to see that it can still figure out the actual phone number even though you have blocked a part of it, right? So what's happening here? So thanks to this error correction codes, so internally what it does is, after scanning, after converting this binary data to the normal text data, so first we'll check if the data is correct by doing some sort of error correction, right? So in fact, this has some deep connections with generate polynomials that you're going to see in DMS, and internally it uses something called as Reed-Solomon error correction codes in order to do this error correction, right? Finally, look at some connect between number theory and cryptography. I'm sure you have all seen this HTTP prefix with URLs. So this is a type of protocol. So when you try to enter a URL into browser, what it does is it automatically appends this HTTP. Right? Why is that? Because HTTP is not secure, right? What I mean to say is, in HTTPS, whatever the data that you send from one place to another, it will be secure. That means the data that you send from one place to another, no one else can intercept that and understand that message, right? So internally, they use something called as cryptography in order to achieve this. It's just a fancy term for saying that you are doing encryption and decryption using two keys, public key and private key. So what's happening internally is, so let's say one wants to send data from one computer to another. First, we encrypt the data and using their public key, and they will send it, and using their private key, sorry, and to decrypt, they'll use the public key, right? So they are going to use two keys in order to do this encryption and decryption. Well, how is this connected to DMS? So you're going to study something called as number theory, and in number theory, you're going to study something called as prime numbers. So there is an important theorem called as prime factorization theorem. So what it says is every number can be factored into a product of prime numbers, right? So in this example, you can see that 48 has been factored into a list of prime numbers, right? So it has only two prime numbers, prime factors, sorry, 2 and 3, right? So like this, what this theorem says that every number can be factored into a list of prime numbers, right? Now, one important consequence of this is that any number can be factored, but if I increase the length of this number, let's say the length of the number is, let's say, 200 digits, then it's very, very hard to do this prime factorization, because there is no known simple technique or a shortcut in order to do this prime factorization, right? So you just have to try out all the possible prime factors, do this division, right? So first of all, it's very hard to store lengthy numbers, and it's also very hard to figure out prime numbers in the first place. So even if you're able to figure out 2000 digit prime number, it's very hard to do division between 4000 and 2000 digits prime number, right? So because of this reason, they use this technique in RSA algorithms in order to do this public key cryptography. Cool. So to summarize, so we basically looked at some applications of counting principles, graph theory, and looked at theory. And also you will study some of the probability related things in DMS. And apart from this, we also see these sort of questions in placements, in myself sort of questions in placement and placement interviews. So please take it serious. I mean, they keep happening. Okay, so I'd like to conclude this talk by encouraging you guys to take machine learning or artificial intelligence, because I feel that machine learning has applications in fields. So if you want to get into machine learning or artificial intelligence, I think you will need to study some of the basic courses here. So I think data structures and algorithms, discrete maths, probability theory, and graph theory are the most basic courses. And I think you will study them anyway in your third or fourth semesters. And I think you will also need to study machine learning, NLP, computer vision, and deep learning. I think they given as this in your sixth or seventh semesters. So yeah, please try to take them, because it's very hard to study this on our own. Cool, that's it.
Students, any questions? Feel free. Any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
So my
Good afternoon,
at the
sorry.
beginning, sorry, sir. At the beginning of the seminar, you said that total number of combinations to get a password is the total number of possible characters to the power of the length of the password, right, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Sir, according to that logic, if the password is ABC. It is the combination of ABC. Then in this way we'll get it's 3 power 3, right? So 3 power 3, 27. It's showing there are 27 total combinations of password, but actually it's only 6, right? Sir?
Right. So some of them will be repeated. So if you're gonna differentiate between the repeated passwords, then yeah, it reduces.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have one question in
Cool.
the chat box. Okay.
Cool.
Sir, are there any open source projects that we can participate in? It's from Sanjay.
Okay. It depends on your interests. My advice here is that try to find out if some of the applications part of DMS matches some of the industry related problems, right? So obviously there is no direct connection between these sort of DMS puzzles and what the industries are doing. So let's start with the problem statements we have the indie, and then try to backtrack and figure out if there is action. So I can talk about of things that I am doing. In ML and NLP part of it, so there are projects that are related to chatbots. That means automatically that can talk to a given user. And you can also work on some of computer vision relates the set of problems that I decide in the beginning, and I'll do one thing. So after this talk, I'll send a couple of links, gadgets that you can go through, and you can probably contribute to them.
There's one more question. What is the future of combination of ML and AI with Android and new tech like VR, AR in future?
Cool. It's a so in the case of AR and VR, so they are heavily using image processing and video processing techniques in order to process. Yeah. So every day try to keep inventing new algorithms, not only new algorithms to improve, but they also have to come the models that they try to come up with in order to fit into these hardwares, right? So yeah, it's an interesting and people are still coming with new things. Yeah, it's a beautiful connection. So even I'm trying to sort of these fields because it's still growing. Yes, the question is, can we increase the complexity of passwords by using new characters of different languages? Yes, we can. It's a good thing to do because it just the number of combinations.
Yes. And they need to know any current development going on in the industry. If you can just
With respect to?
Yeah, with respect to Saurav Prakash, can you elaborate? He's still not.
Okay.
Yeah, with respect to AI and Android.
Okay, so I think Facebook released a couple of projects related to object detection. There is something as Detectron and Det2, which are the object detection algorithms that they have incorporated in their Android phones. You can take a look at it. So I'll send you some links after this. But Detectron. Google for this, and also after this, I'll send a couple of links. And not only this, after getting an image or video, you can also add a couple of other animations to this, or you can beauty this. So I'm sure you have taken a look at a couple of apps like which can verify your image, or can change the image of the person, or it can add some other object in the image to make it beautiful and all these things, right? So all these are sort of applications of this. So that's the in your smartphones, right?
Yeah, there is one more question.
What is your take on sensor fusion with AR and technology combined AI? Well, I have not really done this in depth, so yeah.
Department of Computer Science and Engineering, I thank Mr. Rama for this wonderful session, and we look forward to having many more sessions from you, especially in machine learning and NLP in the next webinar. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Cool. Bye.